Hi there, my name is Troy Kinsey, Managing Partner for Kimberlow Ventures. We help organizations deliver and support services. Actually, organizations, teams, and leaders deliver and support services. I'm here with Paul Culver.
Hey, Troy, it's good to be back. I know we go back a little ways as colleagues. It's great to do another one of these podcasts. We've got a beautiful spring afternoon here in the Seattle area.
Yeah, we do.
Really amazing weather going into this weekend.
Absolutely. So we had a great time doing the first one. I did. I know you did. We were talking about it. We've talked about it since. One of the things that we wanted to do for this one, for this podcast, is bring in a little bit more personal stories, a little personal history. One of the biggest learning challenges in service management isn't the tools or processes or even frameworks,
Mhm.
but it's the people, the politics, and learning from mistakes. So today we thought we'd share some of those errors or mistakes, learning opportunities with folks, and none of these are catastrophic in nature. A couple of them are a little bit uncomfortable because, again, there are things that we could have done differently. But the good news is, myself, and I think the same thing for you, is we've incorporated those into how we work, how we lead, how we work with others. So,
And there is an old adage, Troy, and I think you and I agree on this, is be comfortable with the uncomfortable because that's where a lot of success comes from.
absolutely, and the learning for sure.
Yes.
So in light of that, I'll start off with a learning experience. Uh, I've given a number of reviews over the years, and my thought has always been in giving professional development reviews or professional reviews has been that the review at the time, whether it's quarterly or semi-yearly or yearly, that when that time happens, it's more of a formality. So it shouldn't be the first time that an employee is learning that there's things that they need to work on, things they're excelling in, that should be taking place throughout the course of the year. And I'm a huge advocate for professional growth plans and development and making sure you're looking out for your folks. Um, However, there are occasions uh, when leaders are giving a professional uh, a review and it doesn't turn out well. And so this is an example of that. There was one time where I inherited a team, and including this one individual, and they were caustic. They were caustic to the team, they were caustic to other colleagues, and caustic to leadership. Just really a difficult person.
Mm.
And to the point where I had other teams and colleagues essentially reach out to me after a meeting and say, "So talk to me, what's happening here?" So I had a number of conversations with this individual, and essentially with that thought in mind that, hey, so we need to work on how, or I need for you to change how you're interacting with people because it's too caustic. And so here's some examples, and here's the effect that it's having on the team, on your colleagues. So let's work together on that. And they really weren't open to that. So they would say that they are, and then the next day there'd be something similar. And so it was a challenge. And by the time it came to the formal review, I had discussions with my colleagues and with leadership and with HR that so I'm going to give a honest review to this individual. It's not going to be a surprise. I'll use examples that I've used in the past, but it might not go well. And so, and essentially leadership and HR said, okay, that is the right thing to do. I learned at that point that this person hadn't really had honest reviews up to that point. So essentially there's a little bit of soft shoeing going around that, yeah, but they excel in these areas. So we'll just give them a pass. So as it turns out, so I sat down with this individual, gave them a review. They thanked me. They said they disagreed, but they thanked me. They said yes, there were these occurrences. They did happen. However, you know, so uh, as Afterwards, though, they did go to senior leadership. Huge stink.
And they
Um,
being this
they
individual.
being this individual went to senior leadership and made a huge ruckus over this. This is intolerable. This is I've never been treated like this before. And as a result, leadership came back and said, so we would like you to change your review. And so there was discussion around, look, I gave him an honest review. I spent a lot of time going through making sure it was very fair. So long story short, the learning lesson was several fold. There's certain things that I didn't do that I should have done. So the learning lesson for me was one, don't assume that because people are nodding in a room that that means that they are in agreement. Or even if they say they're in agreement, that you have that kind of alignment, especially when the heat gets turned on, which it was. Two, and this is an important takeaway. If there's anything that involves HR personnel, they think there's going to be possibly issues or challenges, get it in writing. Work with HR, and I was working with HR, but get it in writing. This is what I'm going to do. These are the potential fallout and whatnot. So I guess those are the takeaways. At the end of the day, I still think I did the right thing to give them the honest review, and I still stand by that. I still stand by the review. But again, there's some learning lessons from that. And it's unfortunate because I think that was an opportunity where this individual could have learned as well that, oh, there are repercussions to me being caustic with the people around me. And that was, I think, a lost opportunity.
So I'm hearing a few things from that. You're trying to make someone accountable. You're coming in, maybe it's something that they're not used to. Nobody's actually called them out on it yet, but you try to do it in a professional, loving way.
Yeah.
Sounds like based on the coworker situation that it's a known issue with this individual. People nodding in agreement versus are they nodding because they're processing information and not getting it in writing? I can totally understand that. Yeah, and that's the thing, Troy. All throughout leadership, you're always going to have those outliers, right? There's only so much that you can do, and who knows if there was some protectionism going on for whatever reason. There were things that you couldn't control. So
Yeah.
you said you did something in my mind that's very that stands out, which is being accountable and focusing on uh, doing the right thing, taking ownership of your actions and your decision. Plus, you also did some learning from it too. So,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that that person may walk away never realizing how they contributed to the situation, but that's on them. You did what you wanted to do, what you needed to do.
Thank you.
So,
I would concur that I think there might be one other takeaway, and that is that 98, 99% of people, they want that feedback. They want to be they want to be more effective in terms of a team member, and they want to hear the good with the bad, or the good with the not necessarily the bad, but these are areas that you can improve in. But not everyone. Not everyone wants to hear that. There are some individuals that really don't want to hear that, and they have in their mind how things are, and that's the way it is. And again, the
yeah.
horse you rode in on, they don't they don't really want to hear about it.
Yeah,
But that's few and far. The good news is that's few and far between.
it is few and far between. I will point out though, you weren't manager for me for long enough to actually run into the same situation that you would have.
Never
You,
would have. Never would
you
have.
would. I trust that it wouldn't. I think we know each other.
Never would have.
So yeah.
And usually those reviews are a positive experience
Yeah.
because again, these are the areas that you're working on. Awesome. These are the things that I can do as a manager or leader to help you work on those, either coaching or mentorship or opportunities. These are the things you're excelling in. So let's just keep those going.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
yeah.
Good deal. So yeah, the people aspect is so amazing, right? And you come into an organization, you talk about inheriting teams, learning about new folks. And one of the things I think about, and I'll kind of munch together a couple of different experiences here, but it all kind of rolls up is munging's good. Building out a process. And so in this case, talk about a major incident process. So when we think about service management, particularly IT service management, it's just that core process and governance around when S hits the fan, when something
Mhm.
major breaks, we got major impacts. We've got a pretty solid framework on how we're going to handle it to get service restored as quickly as possible within the service level agreements, um, customer experience feeling good about it, and that we're focusing on the business value of what we're doing. So I think about stakeholder engagement, right, and knowing the scope of stakeholders. So when I think about time that I've set up one or two processes around major incidents where maybe I didn't engage the right stakeholders at the right time to understand what are the key core business functions, the key areas. Maybe we had our list of our critical applications, all well and good. So we put this thing together, we roll it out. Inevitably, a major incident comes along, of course, like it always does. But maybe there was a little bit of chaos and there wasn't still a clear understanding of who do we need to talk to when, do we understand impact and urgency, what the ramifications are, and the context and nuance of how it's impacting the business. So
Sure.
without having had the right conversations with the right people, there was some concern around why isn't this a higher priority, or why are we putting so much rigor on this when it's not really that much of a priority. So the lesson coming out of that was, all right, let's go back. Let's understand what our core business capabilities are, the ownership, not just on the business side, but the IT, so who are our core customers, understanding what all the parameters are, getting agreement on if it's this kind of situation, and maybe here it might be some scenarios. This is how we're going to respond appropriately.
Mhm.
So it's knowing things like, there are obvious things about financial cost, or we can't get checks out the door, or a website is down. There's also a nuance around that I discovered is really important to make sure you have documented, because I've seen uh, network operation knock type teams, look at say, well, I'm just looking at my process here, and this doesn't fall under this, but you've got the business saying, no, this is really critical, and in this case, and I know I've documented this in with clients in the past, is reputation, company reputation. Is it at stake?
Mhm.
It's going to be something that's a lot more nuanced, but could be huge. And sometimes you have support teams that maybe they'll get that. It'll be intuitive to them. Maybe others won't be. That's not a knock on them. It's just that maybe they need a little bit more context around here are the scenarios, and maybe something like company reputation as an important part of that. So end of the day, again, the lesson learned and the takeaway here is making sure we've talked to the right stakeholders, that everyone is in agreement on here are the things, how we're going to operate when there's a major incident, and what these impacts look like, and how we're going to communicate accordingly.
That's a challenge,
Yeah,
especially when you have large teams and you have, for example, 50, 80, 100 service teams and a number of service desks and other associated business units. It's difficult to figure out at times how do you do a selection of the right voices that makes sense, that's going to capture essentially um, the organization, essentially what's the word for it? The view of the organization.
mhm,
The other part that I hear you saying is in terms of visualizing end state. So that's really important.
yeah,
I think a lot of organizations they skip over that pretty quickly. So this is what the solution is. We're going to have a product that does X. Okay, well, what does that mean in terms of the people supporting it, the people impacted by it? So not just the customer, but what does that mean 360?
yeah. It all comes down to good old fashioned requirements gathering. Talk about what is the vision here, right? What are we looking to do? And so I always like to, when you write up stories from an agile standpoint, things you can
Sure.
get in the backlog. I always like to use a as I sow, given when then
Mhm.
approach. So as this particular stakeholder persona, um, when I want this, so this particular thing happens, and then the mechanics of it, given this situation, when this certain condition occurs or these actions occur, then this will be the output or the outcome. So having things lined up like that, it's a very basic product owner and scrum master type of approach to things, but it works. It really works. And you'd also talked about how do we identify those people, right, and be able to talk to them. you won't be able to get full consensus across an organization. And it's a lot of it has to do with looking at organizational change management approaches, looking at key roadmaps, heat maps, if you will, of the different
Mhm.
business areas, and understanding maybe where the biggest pain points are, maybe where the grouchiest customers are, peeling back those layers and showing success one piece at a time without trying to boil the ocean. So making it iterative.
Yep. That brings another thing to mind, not to go down this path, but that brings another thing to mind in terms of when working to improve an organization, the making sure that you have the right stakeholders and making sure that you have the right, you're gathering the right evidence without overkill. So in terms of, most organizations have slews of documentation and process, whatnot. And so making sure that you have an approach to that that's crisp and clear that everyone agrees to is, yeah, absolutely critical. So so my second one is second example of a lesson learned is earlier in my career, I managed a support organization, and we had a vendor come in and deliver a solution, and it was a pretty big, it was a pretty big solution, essentially. So a number of products. And I went to leadership. My main concern at the time was, you know, with how are we going to support that? How are we going to support this solution that the vendor's putting in place? And I was informed that, well, that's not as much of a concern because it's going to be turnkey. The vendor's going to take care of the solution. So really, you just need to manage the vendor. Well, okay, wait a minute. So how are we going to manage the vendor if we really don't understand the product? How are we going to hold them true to form? I think a lot of organizations go through this, and a lot of the organizations that do go through this challenge is because of that. Okay, I'm going to put a lot of focus on this one word, but the word turnkey. I think in terms of like managed services, I think organizations sell the idea that, look, you don't have to worry about that. We have SLAs. You just need to worry about that. We'll take care of it when it needs to get taken care of. So it's okay that everything is opaque. And it's not okay that everything's opaque. It's never okay that things, now I know that. It's not okay ever when things are opaque. So you really can't manage the vendor if you have no idea essentially how the solution works.
Right. Right.
And I had brought this up a number of times. Cut to the end, the what happened, the so what part. So as it turns out, yes, we actually did need to, and the team did need to understand how to manage the solution. And so there was a lot of scrambling essentially to get folks trained and up to speed in terms of how things worked so they could manage it. It was unfortunate because it didn't that I don't think ever needed to take place, the scrambling part. So the takeaways, what could I have done better? I didn't make a convincing enough argument. I had the right intention. Yes, we will need to do this, but I didn't articulate well enough that that scenario, that when we get there, we're not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So I could have done a better job at framing that in such a way that I was convincing to senior leadership at the time. That's what I would have done differently. And since then, and this is probably the most important takeaway. Always go with your gut. Always, do the right thing because you can always look back and at least know that, hey, you did what you thought was morally, ethically the right, quote unquote, the right thing at the time, even if it doesn't pan out. You want to be able to at least say that. Um, at the time, I was right, but I wasn't convincing. So I wasn't convincing enough, clearly. So if you believe in something, fight for it. If you believe in something that should be done, then fight for it. So
That's interesting. You talk about, scrambling and making assumptions. And I mean, it sounds like, you're told one thing and kind of believe it, but then you're back of your mind going, no, I really think we need to call this out.
wait a minute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hold on a second. And, it's It's human nature though, right? Sometimes we try to keep in good graces with an organization by, we think we're building trust, so we don't question them.
Yes.
But at the same time, you want them to trust, you want to demonstrate that you're trusting them, but also bring concerns to the table, acknowledge it, bring concerns to the table saying, here's what I see. It might be missing. Here's some thoughts that I have. Let me know what you think. Because that builds trust the other direction too.
Yeah, that's an excellent point because the trust the trust part of it, because at the end of the day, I represented a team. And so it's not just me and the impact on me, it's the impact on the team. And so that's where it's even more important that you're telling a convincing story. And if you think that something should be a certain way, and it's going to impact your team and the success of your team, then you absolutely need to fight for that. And you need to be convincing. It's essentially clear everything off the table. This needs to be addressed before we can move forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Going back to the whole scrambling thing.
Yes.
So I think about, oh my goodness, okay, scenario, a CMDB, a configuration management database. And for those who don't know what that is, it's essentially soup to nuts. It looks at your entire organization from a IT capability perspective, whether that be in ServiceNow, any other sort of tooling that looks at here's from hierarchical standpoint of the top level stuff all the way down to the very smallest node, spider diagrams, what are all the dependencies, understanding what, if something breaks, who's responsible for that, what are the ramifications all along the line, upstream, downstream, left and right impacts. There's a lot of excitement in trying to stuff things in there, get this thing built out. So when I think about a couple different CMDB engagements that I've had, where I think one situation went awry is because I was excited to come in, stuff a lot of information in there because I'd seen what a healthy CMDB can look like, but not taking the time to really dig in and understand the business processes and what those different pillars were, what the services were. Look at it from that perspective. Look at those different pillars, and part of it is being in fairly new in one organization I was in. I wanted to, kind of like you, wanted to be trusting of what people were doing and maybe sometimes a little cautious to say, well, let's take a step back. I know you're trying to get this thing built out quickly, but let's talk about what success is going to look like with this. And so the lesson learned coming out of that for me, Troy, was engaging the right areas and talking to folks about let's define what our services are. Let's define a critical application. Let's look at things like software versus application because they're easily conflated, but they're not exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to understand how do we map dependencies effectively and all that kind of good stuff. And so I spent the time there. I took it from virtually zero to about 50% of critical applications mapped, which was really, really good progress in the window of time that I was there. Where I saw it work really, really well was another organization where I had alignment with what we call our CPGs or capability product groups, where I embedded myself with those folks, had the conversations about services, did a lot of organizational change management, rolling out the CMDB, and through my actions, I helped a significant contribution to get us at a 90+% data quality, data health quality. So we look at, is it current? Is it accurate? Does it meet all the parameters that we need? And that was something I was very, very proud of. So that's the kind of thing I needed to take to this other organization was that slowing down, talking about what our offerings are, having the right conversations, and the whole adage about slow is smooth is fast,
Mm-hmm.
and smooth will be fast, to taking that time to say, let's pump the brakes a little bit and understand what we're actually really going after.
That's difficult for a lot of teams to actually see at first. That there's that sense of look, if we slow down, then essentially everything's going to come to a screeching halt, and we're not going to be successful. 9 times out of 10, you're making mistakes as you're going too fast,
Mhm.
you're overlooking things, and you're not being efficient. So yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Efficient and effective too.
And
And
effective.
effective. And one of a very graphic example I think I've used with you before is you're sitting, let's say, driving on the way here, coming down Aurora or where Meridian or whatever it is, or Dexter Avenue, and let's say, or it was just someplace like in Ballard, right, where it's sidewalks and people are walking the dogs and people are having coffee, couples are out on dates, and babies are being pushed
Hmm.
in wheelchairs, in strollers,
Old babies.
older babies, yes, and you've got traffic backed up, and you go, you know what? I'm not getting to where I need to go fast enough. So what I could do is go and just drive on that sidewalk, run everyone over, cause a whole bunch of problems, and make some people will have a really, really bad day, and I'll probably end up getting arrested and go to jail. Um, but you know what? I was efficient because I drove fast, and I crossed everyone and like a bull in a china shop. But was I effective? No, I wasn't.
No, in the long term, you weren't efficient either
No,
because you'll
no.
make up for that time, 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, you know what it was? It's just a big flipping hot mess. That's
Yeah.
all I was.
So awesome. And you also mentioned, yeah, visualizing the solution, I think also is another one, which is, it just keeps coming back, which is making sure that everyone understands what the final end state, what is the goal, what are we after?
Visualizing the solution, but there's also don't be so tied to it that you can't be flexible along the way. Because I will admit I'm one of these people that sometimes I'm hesitant to set certain goals because I thought, well, what if it's not exact? What if it's not going to be, what if something happens? I'm like, you know what? Who cares if something happens? Course correct.
Yeah, it'll
You know,
never be
yeah,
exact. It
no,
doesn't have to be, but it needs,
yeah,
yeah. But it also shouldn't be a surprise.
sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So there's a balance there somewhere. So the third example that I have is of a learning lesson, essentially, which I use all the time now, essentially in terms of whenever I'm reaching out to a client organization, um, is it kind of touches on a couple of things we've already talked about, but essentially it's getting different points of view. Essentially, I worked with a service desk and talked to one of the leaders who said that, well, they're all using the same application, the same way, the same process, and essentially everybody's on the same page in terms of how things should be done, and here's the documentation for it, and everyone's in sync. And as it turns out, not a whole lot of time went by when we were holding workshops. And as it turns out, that wasn't the case. It essentially, and this is one of the reasons why it's really important to have workshops and have Gumbas and talk to different perspectives so you can get a kind of a more 360-degree view of how is it really working? How is work truly done? You can't rely on just one individual. So as it turns out, nobody was doing the same thing, and nobody was clear in terms of what the process should be. And all the documentation, this is true a lot of organizations I've found, you've probably seen the same thing. There's no end of documentation, but okay, so which version are we looking at, and which of this is actually should we be following, and is anyone actually reading this? So what happens is teams end up doing their own thing. Individuals doing what they think is the right thing in terms of satisfying customers and processing tickets and whatnot. But the challenge with that, which we found each time we do this, is that when everyone's using a different process, there's no real clean way of improving efficiency. And typically, when processes are developed organically like that, um, they're not efficient or effective. And also customers, essentially, the customer experience is all over the map because everyone's following their own process. So first and foremost, it's understanding where everybody is and what everyone's trying to do, and then step through and create a process that makes sense for the organization. And 9 times out of 10, that improves efficiency and effectiveness right out of the gate. So by a lot. So, yeah, so I guess the takeaway there is get different perspectives, make sure you understand how work actually does work. And there wasn't a lot of time lost with this particular example because we held workshops in like 2 or 3 weeks. But my initial assumption the first time I had this experience was, oh, well, okay, so they're the leader, they should know.
Yeah.
They should know what everyone's doing. Yeah. So,
Assumption.
we
Yeah.
all have, we're all a little bit naive at times in our career. So, have the thing is to learn from it and move on.
Interesting stuff. You talk about understanding how an org works, getting various inputs. And so this is a great segue for my last thing I want to talk about is adapting to the culture that you're going into, walking into it, understanding it, because culture is huge in every organization. And I think about an organization that I came from that had a specific culture where it was beg for forgiveness versus asking for permission. It's okay to move fast and break things, kind of like the old, and I'll just say it, the old Facebook thing Mark Zuckerberg did. And this was not a FANG company that it came from, but this company that I was at was in a unique sector, unique industry, and they did move fast. And not that we broke things necessarily, but there was a lot of pushing, pushing, driving, driving. And
Right.
so, admittedly, when I came into that, I wasn't as used to it, but I got kind of seasoned on it. So when I went to another organization that was not as, it was more focused on the feelings piece and kind of how, the experience and more collaboration. I wouldn't say consensus because you're never going to get consensus, but it's a manager that I once had there had mentioned it's not people don't remember what you said, but it's how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
So coming into this,
It's a great line.
yeah, it was great. I'd love to say his name, but I know we're protecting the innocent here. But it's one I always remember. Um, Coming into this organization, and naturally you bring some of the baggage is the right word. Sometimes it's baggage, but sometimes it's learnings, right? Everything that you've acquired, things that you've been seasoned on, you bring them to the next organization. It's kind of like your tool set, whether it's hard skills, soft skills, whatever it happens to be. In this case, it was taking that, go, 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 hit the ground running, gonna charge through this, take the bull by the horns, choose your euphemism, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what it did. It's making some progress. Things were pretty good, except it was not necessarily well received. And people tend to be a little bit more looking at you like, okay, who is this person? I'm kind of getting what he's trying to do, but I'm not on board. I'm not on board because I'm not comfortable. And we talked earlier about, you got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable to be successful, et cetera. But again, we're talking at the end of the day, people are going to do things based on their emotions. I don't care how you try to stack it up.
Yep.
They will. And so going back to the whole idea again of slowing down and building relationships, getting to know how people tick. You have helping them understand the why, how they can contribute, what success looks like, understanding, doing more listening than talking.
Mm-hmm.
Coming and listening, providing some input, owning up to any mistakes or answers that I have and responses that I have. And what I found coming out of it was people were more like, oh yeah, this is great. Paul's coming to talk to us again. Paul's listening. I had one group that I was aligned with that the manager had admitted early on. He goes, I was skeptical. I didn't understand why you were embedded with us and helping us do these things that, what are you doing? What value are you providing from a, service management standpoint? What is that? And so what it was, and I always love this, they said, hey, you know what we love about this? You're telling our story.
Mm-hmm.
You're understanding our service value in terms of what our particular pillar provides. Some of the tools we've been working on. You told our story about this first ever thing in our industry that we came up with to help understand potential customer markets. I designed and delivered quarterly service reviews where the first ones that were stood up included this particular customer. And I said, thanks for spending all that time being embedded with us and listening. and being able to nicely present core values. They're all things that we understood were important, but we're so swamped that it's good to have someone with air cover who's kind of putting that holistic view, that bird's eye view on everything and presenting it to the C-level leadership. So that was the thing for me is I like going in and having a likability factor, a personability factor
Sure.
to engage with folks and be a listener.
Yeah. That's important. Yeah. Yeah. Culture is another one of those things that's often overlooked.
Yeah.
Especially when coming into a new organization, especially if you're new in terms of management leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. Well,
So,
Troy, this has been great.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
your time today. Thank you for another fun podcast.
Yeah. Likewise.
For those of you that are watching, if you, we'd love to answer any questions you might have or continue the discussion online. So please comment. Other than that,
Comment, reach out to either of us on LinkedIn,
yeah, good point.
connect with us and love to have the conversation. Other than that, Troy, I'm ready to have a fantastic weekend. I think it
Excellent.
looks supposed to be
looks
very nice.
beautiful
It is.
outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, we don't have the Space Needle within line of sight, but it's hiding back there.
Next
So
time.
next time we'll have to figure that out.
Always
Yeah.
improving, customer service improvement.
Right.
So always look for something that we can do to improve.
Good. Troy,
Awesome.
it's
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. All right,
Cheers.
thanks so much.
All
We'll
right.
see